Stay tuned for today's episode. We're going to continue our conversation with Steve Jackson, noted therapist in the local Nashville area, as we also continue smoking Padrones and drinking King of Kentucky and Leiper's Fork, and I have no idea which is which because I fooled myself. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Two Guys on a Porch. I'm Jason. He's still Bradford. My hunting dog, Kim, is still with us by my side on the porch as we're back again with our good friend Steve Jackson. As we said before, we've been doing this for 20 plus years. We'll taste various brown water, bourbons, whiskeys. No matter what it is, it's always filled with the flavor of friendship. We pair that with a fellowship stick, talk about life. We don't always agree, but we always learn something and always have a great time doing it. This is part two of our episode, if you will. If you haven't watched the first episode, go back and watch that. This is a continuation of that same episode with our good friend Steve Jackson, one of the OGs. I said OGs because he was with the original group that we used to get together and have some brown water and fellowship sticks, play a few cards, and that's where this was all kind of born out of. And we're continuing our conversation with him on this beautiful Tennessee afternoon. Stop and like and subscribe, because if you don't, you may miss something, and you're going to regret it if you miss it. And so we're back on the porch with Steve, continuing our conversation, which has been really interesting, and I've been learning a lot myself so far.
Before we jump into that, we're also continuing to smoke the Padrones we started with and drinking the King of Kentucky and the Leiper's Fork cask strength. And we did a blind taste in the first episode.
Right.
We talked at length about that. And I get to play again because I don't remember which glasses I put in place. And so I re-poured both and have no idea which is which. So this will be fun for me.
Yeah, you know what? You'll be right regardless. So since you were so wrong, and so was I, the first episode.
Regardless, we're drinking good whiskey, so it doesn't matter.
Oh my gosh, yes.
So Steve, thanks for coming back and joining us.
Absolutely.
And I felt like just scratched the surface on men's health and the role that you've played now professionally with regard to addressing that. But I want you to comment more broadly on what are men and young men dealing with today in the world of mobile phones and how they've been raised and the challenges they face and over-sexualization and all of those things that, whether they're in your office or not, what you see.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of led right into it.
So is the episode over now? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. You did. I mean, you hit right into it. I mean, all of those things that you're talking about cause isolation, and it's like, things that stay in the dark fester, and, there's no healing in those. And so when you can kind of like get that stuff out in the light, I mean, then there's an opportunity for healing. There's an opportunity for God to step in there and do healing. And he uses others to do that, but it's interesting you say that because, there's not really a lot out there about what, men need to do. I think back in was it like the 2000s when they had kind of early 2000s when they had kind of this big push about, men going out and, doing wilderness and exploring their manhood. And there was a lot of good things about that, but there was also some, speaking of like objectifying or kind of putting yourself above women, looking at women in a different way. I mean, there were some negative things there too. But I think the most important thing is that just sitting down with somebody and just kind of collaborating with someone. And that's kind of how I think of myself is that, my job as a therapist is to work on whatever my client's goals are, which might be different than what I think would be best for them, but it's their goals and what we're working on and working towards. And so just being able to have someone to collaborate with, which is what you guys do. I mean, you collaborate with each other, and there's a lot of and it just really affects you, your well-being. It just positively affects that, having that.
So it raises a question for me.
Yeah.
I think back to before I got married, the very first time, I shared some of my past with my first wife, and she said, "Do you think you need some counseling around that? And I naively and perhaps arrogantly said, no, I really think God has ushered me through that, and I'm in a really good place. And believed that to be true. I think I was being sincere.
Yeah.
But again, naively and arrogantly, I think, in saying that. And then my life blows up, and we ultimately ended in divorce. And although I had been in men's groups, I had shared what I thought was fairly openly,
Yeah.
but not entirely. It took that as the next catalyst to really become vulnerable in a way I didn't know how to be or was ashamed to be prior. Jason was one of the first people I talked to. I talked to you. Is there a way to avoid your life blowing up?
Well,
to
it's
have
interesting. Yeah,
that?
I mean, we. So the way I would say it is that I think it's like, it's peeling the onion back. I might need to get through something and peel this layer off before I can kind of see maybe what the next area of my life is that I need to work through. And that's a good example of that. And I hated that it took just like you said, your life blowing up, really a traumatic experience. But generally, that's what it takes a lot of time for men, especially men that are kind of avoiders. Maybe they didn't get a lot of, emotional nourishment. They didn't really they were kind of taught to be, like I was talking in the earlier episode about being self-sufficient or independent. And so it almost takes that kind of a blow to recognize, wait, I need other people and I need that connection. And I am benefiting from those relationships with others far more than I ever thought I could, and because at the end of the day, I mean, guys, we're good at, medicating our stuff. And what is going to provide the most kind of healing for us is being able to sit down, with our friends, with our spouses, with our family, and just share what your experience is like. I think women do a lot better job of that. Where I would say they care more about, they don't really care about the results. They care about, like, how did you feel during that experience, during the process, where men are like, all right, well, just tell me the results.
And you're like, wait,
Did I win?
Yeah.
And
Just tell me the results.
And I'm like, wait, there was a feeling?
Yeah, there was a feeling. I don't care how long it took you and what you went through. Like, tell me about the results. Yeah.
So is there, if I'm understanding you correctly, and it's a question, but I'm posing it as a statement, just like there in economics, there's a supply and demand curve, and where the two cross, that's the price of the product. In counseling, is there a curve of how vulnerable a guy is willing to be with you asking the right questions? So, so basically they have to get to a certain point of being vulnerable, and you have to know, figuring them out to ask the right questions, and that's where the breakthrough comes through.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that. And, the one thing that I have to do is have to earn that trust. And I'm trying to do my best to be able to understand kind of where they're coming from and be sensitive to that. Because there's been so many, so Karen Purvis, who did trust-based relational intervention, which is really a model that is designed for kids from hard places, like kids that have come out of like either they've lost their parents or or orphans. She has this great saying that, and I don't know if it's even hers, but she would say that relationships have the power to do the most damage in our lives, but they also have the power to do the most healing in our lives as well. So if I've been hurt in relationship, generally the healing is going to come out of being in relationship with someone that can really validate, that can really show up and understand and witness your story. And then hopefully, I mean, when someone has gone through something really difficult and you validated it for them, and maybe for the first time in their life, they're allowing themselves to be, angry about something that maybe they just kind of pushed down and dismissed. Well, now you get an opportunity to really say, man, that sounds really hard. And and if it was me, I would just be so angry. And, they kind of start to allow themselves to get angry, and anger's good. Anger's like gas in the car. it can get me from point A to point B. That's healthy anger, right? Like I need to get there, putting gas in the car, it's going to get me there. So I'm using anger to motivate me to do something that is actually has positive results. But it's also highly combustible, and if I take a match to it, I can blow the whole car up. So what you're trying to do is not leave somebody stuck in that trauma. You're trying to help them get through that and be able to, and that's what's scary as a therapist when someone does come in and they kind of for the first time ever realize that, oh my gosh, what I did go through was incredibly devastating for me. And then you don't see them again. And I'm like, that's where I kind of get worried that I didn't want to leave them in that space, because that's just the first part of the process, is having someone be able to witness that and validate that. And then the next part of the process is kind of the healing journey. Okay, well, what now? Now that I know that this has affected me the way that it has, and it's influencing me, but I didn't realize it was more unconscious. What do I do with that now? And so part of that is like kind of going down this road of, being able to be more self-compassionate towards yourself, being maybe even to forgive parts that you maybe believe you played in that, like a lot of shame can kind of get you stuck in it. And then what that does, it frees up the ability for us to maybe go back to those, players that hurt me, to forgive them. And that's where I see this incredible shift. And it's almost just like, you can see a client come in one week and then come in the next week, and it's just like this weight has been released off of their shoulders. And that's one of the things that it's so exciting to see that. And I'm privileged to see that. Does that even answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. All right.
No.
So one question that I have that I was formulating while you were talking was this idea that I'm neither fixed nor finished.
None
Or
of us.
any of us
None
are?
of us are, yeah.
And so I think, again, perhaps naively or arrogantly or both, come out of, therapy sessions and, you think, I need to share my own story with others. And maybe by doing that, it helps them feel like there's a space to do that. And I've done that in situations where it's either met with, I don't believe I'd have told that, brother. They just, it could be a group of people where, man, they're just not there. And so I feel damaged in some way. I was overly vulnerable. It was not the right environment. And so the idea that, man, it's not going to be because you have some skills to cope that you're not going to get hurt again. That vulnerability is still going to cost you.
Absolutely.
It's worth that cost. But how do you prepare them for, look, you're going to go into the world and you're going to get hurt.
Yeah, that's good. It makes me think of a lot of people that are going through recovery, and they need some extra help and assistance, and they need a community around them to encourage them. And a lot of times they'll go in those groups and they'll start sharing their story. And what popped in my mind is them feeling like, well, those guys aren't like me, or they don't get my story, or their stories are way far worse than mine. And being able to really be, like you said, knowing that it's not a perfect world, and we're gonna hurt each other. It's not like anybody's gonna be able to be fully trustworthy. But it's you being able to buy in that your story is worth sharing and worth telling. And then you get trickled in with people that you feel like get it, and they show up and they understand and they care for you. And you get met there with that compassion. And I think a lot of times, and that's what starts to shift in us, because now we're with a safe person that literally listens, understands, and can really highlight for me that what I went through is really difficult. And when I get that, then I start to, well, maybe there's others that can hear my story. Or maybe I'll share this with my friend. And it's just not what, as men, it's way out of our comfort zone.
So, we've all got sons, right? And one of my sons is married and has his own children. Same for you. You're going to be there in a short few years. And I had a guy comment to me. He said, I think our children are going to be so much better equipped to parent their children than we were from a technology standpoint and all of those things that we were like, wait, what's on your phone?
Oh yeah.
And do you think that that's true? And have you had an opportunity to see that next generation manage that differently than what we experienced?
I was actually talking to my son about that the other day, because he would have said, there's a lot of things that he would have done differently than we did.
Dad, you sucked.
But now he's reevaluating that, and so. But yeah, I mean, I have a son that graduated as a computer engineer. I could never stay ahead of him in parental controls and managing all of that. But he's recognized that there was a lot of speaking of safety, that he wants to protect. He has 2 boys and he wants to protect them from all of that. But yeah, I mean, that generation that grew up, with screens, and now
that we didn't know how to address.
No, we didn't. And a lot of us didn't even have healthy practices ourselves because we were fascinated by it. So tell me your question again and see if I can be more specific.
Is that next generation, your son, our sons, better equipped to deal with that because it's been so familiar than we did? We were clueless.
I think the way they're going to do a better job with it is that, and this was easy for us to do in our generation. It was easy for us to kind of, when something did happen, our children were exposed to something that was very scary and very hard, very harsh. I think we could easily overreact to that. And I think what they're going to be able to do a better job of is be able to understand that more, and to be able to hopefully lead and parent and and discipline in a way that makes their kid feel like, okay, this is normal. There's not something wrong with me. I just made a bad decision. And I think they're going to do a better job of that. And it leads me into this, and this is just me, but I see this generational thing where our parents, we were raised, and you guys have to, you feed into this. But I was a latchkey kid. Lots of autonomy, independence, which I mentioned earlier. What was y'all's experience as a kid? Were your parents hovering over you and making sure?
No,
not at all.
Okay.
No.
See, our generation, we did that. I believe that we got way more involved, and we kind of robbed, overcorrected, great word. We overcorrected, and we robbed our kids of a lot of that autonomy and independence. I can see now with my son and his boys, I can see where he's bringing back more autonomy into their lives. They're still very careful to keep their kids safe, but I can kind of see that with him. And so I don't see with him an overcorrection of that, but I can see that next generation, the generation you're talking about, maybe will be more looser with just kind of like not being so freaked out when things go wrong or when there's a problem. That lawnmower parent that literally is trying to knock down every obstacle in front of their kid. I think that maybe that generation is going to let some obstacles be there, and they're going to be more comfortable with navigating that with their kids.
So about overcorrecting, not to digress, but to digress. Bradford, what's your second choice? Your second testing.
I keep sipping him back and forth, and my decision is they're both really good whiskey, and I would not go out and spend $2,500 on a bottle of King of Kentucky.
You go down the road to Leiper's Fork and buy that.
Even though maybe, because I don't know which is which anymore, maybe the King of Kentucky is better, but not so much I can tell a discernible difference.
Yeah.
I mean, kudos to Leipers because they are phenomenal at distilling whiskey.
Yeah.
And I think it's great value. Speaking of which, they've got downtown Franklin, another spot for men to be entertained while women are out shopping, not to draw stereotypes, but I just did. Because we talked about Mission Cigar, men can, daddy daycare, as Monty refers to it. But there's House of Spirits in downtown Franklin, as well as Stable Reserve, so 2 local distilleries where you can go and hang out and, enjoy their spirits. It's phenomenal. So.
Stable Reserve was one of those barrels, and in 2 episodes ago now, we tasted Tennessee Collective. And Stable Reserve was one of those 12 distilleries that was part of that collective.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I would not go out and buy the King of Kentucky, but I don't know which I like better.
Yeah, so even with experience now and tasting it before and knowing the answer, you still have difficulty discerning.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What I was more impressed with is the way, speaking of our bourbon, how you smoothly transitioned into that question. So
Look at you with the segue.
yeah. Well, I have to like throw a few dead jokes around. So if my kids ever do watch this, they'll be like, there he goes again.
If they ever?
Huh?
What do you mean, if they ever?
Well,
aren't they faithful subscribers and viewers, Steve?
Well, they need to be, right? I mean, but this is something that that I'm interested in. So it might be hard sell for me to get them to partake in it.
So I'm curious about something, and it's not necessarily a men's health issue, but I think there's an idea I've got in my head, right or wrong, that people are either have a bent to being optimistic or pessimistic. It's the way they see the world. It's the way they interact with people. And I view myself as being more optimistic. My father was. I've seen that in my son. That's his natural bent. And so I kind of have this idea that things will work out. I'm sure some faith and theology built into that. But from your profession, the people you interact with, do you agree that, one, that statement is true? And whether it is or not, does it have an impact on their receptiveness and ability to move forward? Pessimism or optimism?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a good balance there, because part of us needs to recognize that, maybe there is kind of danger, maybe coming out of the pessimistic, kind of like looking for signals of things I need to address. But yeah, going back to, it wouldn't surprise me that if, you went back and reflected on that with your father being a very positive person, because I'm a trauma-informed attachment therapist. So what that means...
Yeah, I have no idea what you just said.
It just means that I believe that, our relationship, the ability for us to relate with others is imprinted on us very early in childhood. Very early in childhood.
Okay.
So if you
say
were
early, like 3 years old?
like as early as 12 months, like you can develop your attachment style, whether you are anxious avoidant or like preoccupied, or, whether you are fearful avoidant, those types of things can literally go all the way. Even though there's research now that's even, neuronatal type stuff, like, was my mom anxious when I was, in her womb, and did I have some of that anxiety, like, going through my body as an infant? And a lot of it has to do with like how our parents met our needs in those younger ages. Were they constantly there for me? Were they there for me sometimes? Were they not there for me at all? And going back to men, is that I think there's almost this fear is that I need to make my son strong, right, and resilient. And the world is hard out there, and it's easy to get hurt. So I'm going to say, hey, big boys don't cry, or real men don't shed tears, so, or like Tom Hanks, like there's no crying in baseball. So it's like we take that into this, okay, well, it's not okay for me to share any of the more challenging.
He was talking to women, though.
He was
talking to women.
It was. But I have a feeling he would have said that too if he was coaching men. League of Their Own.
Good movie.
So I think that, we're going back to your question, is that a lot of that stuff is imprinted on us early on. Now, here's the great news. And what also can affect that. There's even research that shows that 80% of people's attachment style actually comes from one of your primary caregivers, mom or dad. Now, there's things that change that, like a traumatic experience. It doesn't even have to do with your parents. It could be something that you could have been in a bad relationship, or you could have been in a very, very traumatic event that basically hurts your ability to trust others. But if I had parents that were trusting, talking about being positive, then it's easier for me to be able to trust others, But if I didn't have parents meeting my needs and I had to kind of take care of myself, we didn't have this. Well, actually, some of this was very overt, like when I was growing up. Hey, if you want something done right, do it yourself. If you want something, or if you need to get something done, you can't really count on others. Those are words spoken over me as a child. So right there and then, my parents or grandparents in some of those cases were saying to me is that it's either weak or you're really risking stepping out there to make yourself in any way dependent on others. So that was kind of like breaking through that. Now, the good news is that I did have people in my childhood that were the opposite of that, that did understand that we all have limitations. And what makes a person strong is when they resource themselves around those limitations. And going back to the flood that we talked about in the last episode, that was a moment when I recognized that I had limitations. And I can either continue to be stubborn and try to get this done, go kicking and screaming, or can I recognize I need help? Please help me. And that was a pivotal moment. And actually, there was another time during my counseling education where I was sitting in a moment of is like, it's actually a blessing to recognize that I have limitations. And there are people out there that can help me with those limitations. But remember, we're raised, we shouldn't have limitations. We should be able to muscle our way through anything. And that's why I think men really struggle with it, because, they look at it as a form of weakness, that if I tell Jason about my struggle, he is going to look down on me and he's going to think less of me in that moment.
But a man's got to know his limitations. Clint Eastwood.
There you go.
Yeah, that's
Even
a manly
Clint,
man, right?
I mean, yeah. And if we go back to scripture, I think of the relationship that David had with Jonathan. I mean, that if you want to go and learn how God, David, a man after God's own heart, and what his relationship looked like on earth with another man. Yeah. I mean, that is a very intimate relationship,
Absolutely.
Well, Nate Larkin, who wrote and formed Samson Society.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That whole idea, that David and Jonathan relationship, was the idea that how did they really solidify that friendship is David laid down his armor. So you talk about vulnerability. He put down everything that could protect him.
Oh, that's a great metaphor, yeah.
And so I think that's top of mind of really how we need to interact with others. I think going back to my question about, optimism versus pessimism, I think whether I'm attracted to like-minded people or what have you, but I think about the relationships just sitting here today on the porch is, Jason, you always have kind of a it's gonna be okay approach, but realistic about it, right? I think your outlook is very optimistic, and that's encouraging to me. And Steve, you've always been one of the most encouraging people. I think that may be one of God's gifts to you, is that you're able to do that.
Yeah.
To your friends, to me specifically, I'm grateful for that. But I think it encourages that continuing optimism to have the opportunity to surround myself with people who kind of have that same view.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's good. Like the metaphor that was coming up in my head. So yes, I think there's a lot of energy and movement in that. Like actually at the end of the day, it's going to be okay. It's going to work out. But what you want to be careful of, like I was saying, balancing that out, is that if there's a snake in the grass, right, and you're telling your kid, hey, it will be okay, just go around the snake. Maybe there is a point where you go, there's a snake in the grass, and I think we need to do something about that. So there is actually a threat, and it needs to be addressed. So let's not just dismiss it. But let's also say, hey, we'll get through this and it will work out and we'll be fine. We'll do it together. And I think that's where you're balancing the two. Like, especially when someone's telling their story, is you want to say, man, that was really hard what you went through. And I can't believe that you made it through that. And I can't believe that happened to you and the people hurt you in that way. So that's what I was saying. You want to validate that, and you want to be able to go into the sadness and the hurt and the pain, but then you don't want to leave them there. I mean, Jason, you can probably relate to that. I mean, you can, as you're doing, your diagnosis and seeing what the issues are and the pain, and you'll be able to identify it. There's always a plan. How can we heal this? And you use the word, Bradford, fix. I mean, that's what I've had. Lots of men that come in, all right, Steve, my wife sent me in here and you need to fix me. I mean, that is just like right then I'm trying to totally shift out of that. And there's not going to be any fixing going on in here, but I will I would love to walk with you during your healing journey. Like, what does that healing journey look like? And I would love to
That
walk
sounds
through
like
that.
therapy language.
It does, yeah. That's therapy.
My ex-wife ended up.
Does that make me look weak to you?
My ex-wife ended up being a therapist, and my son would tell me the story of when, his mom would get on to him. This was after we were divorced, and she would start to say something, and she'd start pulling out that language. He was like, "Oh no, here we go." He'd roll his eyes like, "Here comes the therapy language."
So my kids had a name for it. It's like, Dad's trying to therapize us.
Therapize. I like that.
Yeah.
Strategy, therapize. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a balance to kind of get back. But it is, I mean, yes, I think most of us, when we're in a low space, that we want to be energized with positivity. But that goes back to maybe I'm not being honest. I'm projecting something. Maybe I'm not being honest about my hurt.
Right.
And I need to maybe go back, do a little work around that so that I can sit with someone that is more pessimistic and someone that is positive, and it's not a huge, energy drain on me either way.
Right.
So,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think, this is really a shout out to my wife, because if there are points in my life where I doubt God and his presence in playing a role in my life, I look at my wife, who is literally a miracle sitting there, because if anybody hears her story for more than a couple of minutes, their kind of almost universal response is, how did you come out of that? How did you survive that? And she's had siblings that literally did not. And her response is, I don't have any explanation other than I feel like God's hand was on me from the beginning. And so I'm married to a miracle, is the way I look at that. I'm grateful for our relationship, but I mean, she literally is a, walking, talking miracle. So
she's just a wonderful person in general.
Well, but when those doubts creep in, and she would tell you the same thing, it wasn't anything she did. She really believes God's hand was on her, and there's no other explanation than that.
Yeah.
Better half is not a euphemism for Bradford.
Well, I sure
what
needed
was
that.
His better half is not a euphemism in Bradford's case.
Yeah.
Very true.
Go back. I think we're good on time, but I think I think a lot of things what happens in our society nowadays, we want to just blame something, and phones get blamed on it.
Yes.
My opinion, and tell me if I'm incorrect on that, the phones are not necessarily to blame itself. It's more just the availability. Back when we were growing up, and I'm thinking specifically of like pornography. If you wanted to see pornography when we were growing up, you go down to the 7-Eleven, you try to convince the guy to sell you a magazine. Nowadays, with a phone, you've got to actively protect yourself for that. And I'm not just talking to teenagers. I'm talking, me as a father of daughters who, like, all my daughters were cheerleaders, as you well know.
Yep.
And so I follow their cheerleading team. You know what happens as a guy if you follow cheerleaders on on Instagram?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, what is this picture? Because Instagram gives you that feed,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
You have to actively, just for lack of a better word, you have to weed the garden. It's like, what is this? Delete report, delete report, delete report. The phone seems to be it's just a highway to all the good, but also the bad things in the world, and it kind of it promotes whatever direction you're going in, good or bad. Or would you agree, or is it the phone itself a bad thing?
That is a great question. I think at times I would say the phone. I wish I could just throw my phone out the window. But I mean, it is. I mean, so what comes up for me, Jason, is now more than ever we need people in our lives to help us stay accountable.
Yeah.
Because the phone is just so. I mean, it was hard work. As when we were young, if we wanted to see like pornography, it was a chore.
Yeah.
Now I can just close my bedroom door and make a couple of clicks, and I'm viewing whatever I want to view. And so I think being honest about that and saying, here's this very tempting device that can really lead me down into some dark places, is I need, and we go back to, I need someone that understands I'm struggling with that and that's checking in on me and holding me accountable to that. Like how much time did you spend on your phone?
So let me ask you this.
Yeah.
What's the harm? Let's have that argument. Like, what's the harm?
In pornography?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the harm?
What is the harm in pornography? Well, once again, we're talking about relationship, healthy relationship. So part of healthy relationship is like navigating differences. Like, here's how I feel about this. Here's how you feel about it. How can we be able to kind of meet in the middle with that, compromise or negotiate those differences so that we can have closeness and trust? And I would always say that intimacy is not close, physical closeness. If I jumped over there in your lap, Bradford, you're going to be feeling very intimate with me?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. But it's us negotiating that. Hey, Bradford, would you be comfortable if I like just moved this table out of the way and slid over a little bit? Would you be comfortable with that?
come on.
Okay, so we're negotiating that.
Right.
So what pornography does, you could probably speak more to the brain stuff that's going on with the neurotransmitters and the chemistry that's going on there. But what it does is the answer in pornography is always yes. Whatever I want, whenever I want. There's no work involved. The answer will be yes.
So there's no relationship.
There's no relationship. I'm just going to get what I want and have that need met. And there was no sacrifice or no negotiation in that process. So that's why a lot of times I think, men get to where their brain, flips on them and then they start objectifying women, and they start looking at those relationships totally different, which causes them to get angry when things aren't going well, especially in their romantic relationships, or it causes them to isolate and say, that's just too much work. I don't really benefit from that. But you know what? I can go to the bedroom tonight. I can flip on the phone and I'm going to get exactly what I think I need in that moment. But it's faux. It's faux connection.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about girls? I've heard this is becoming more predominant.
The number one rising, trying to think how to say
use
this.
of pornography?
Yeah, use of pornography is from females.
Because they're trying to match what they perceive boys wanting.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah, and I would also say because of what is happening with screens is that there's not those connection needs, those friendships, those relationships happening that is giving my body what it needs. Is that, hey, that's just another avenue for females as well to be able to connect in some way and feel something and feel some kind of connection.
Yeah.
Is it not also, I totally agree with what you're saying, but to take it to the next step, it's basically taking what God has given us and shortcutting it. It's leaving ourselves short. You in a marriage, you get that, we all have that physical need.
Yeah.
And in marriage, we get that physical need met, but, talking about sex, but it's much more than that. I mean, to leave it there at pornography or even just having a one-night stand, it leaves it, you're drinking the cheap bourbon. You could have, the whatever, the old Fitzgerald. It's such a cheap version of what it can be.
Yep.
And it's all about you now. It's not, and you said this, it's all about that person going after pornography or that one night stand. It's all about them and gratifying their needs, as opposed to when you're in that relationship, it's something much more than that. You're meeting somebody else's needs, and in turn, you're meeting their needs, and it comes into this whole new thing that you wouldn't know otherwise. To shortcut that, you are just you're cheating yourself.
Right.
It's I don't know. It's winning the race, but you took the shortcut. You won the race, but
that's a good analogy.
You didn't have the satisfaction of completing the marathon and getting the medal because you worked for it.
Yeah, that you actually cut off those last 10 miles and went on the back road. So that of itself is robbing you of the ability to say, hey, I went through this whole process, trained for it, and sweated through it and suffered through it, and I completed the race. And when I crossed the finish line, there's something truly to be celebrated. But yeah, it's a shortcut. I can understand why. Because relationships are really incredibly difficult, and we're even more and more becoming, more ill-equipped to understand relationship and what that looks like. And so it's very understandable. And I would say, yes, it's like anything, that's worthwhile, there's generally going to be some suffering involved in it. And that's just a quick fix. And it doesn't give us what we what we think it's going to give us. At the end of the day, it's empty.
Yeah,
It's
leaves you
empty.
Yeah,
Yeah, so what am I going to do if I'm empty? Well, I'm going to want more.
yeah. It's a sugar high. It's not that sustaining
Yeah.
completion.
Yeah.
Well, to close us out, we're not taking shortcuts on the porch.
No, we're not.
And
We're doing it right today with these pours, these smokes, this company. We've done it right today.
absolutely. And Steve, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you joining us today. I appreciate what you do. I think you've made it evident that people could trust you if they need a therapist locally.
Indeed.
And I know I've recommended you to others that I know and will continue to do so. So I'll look for a commission with regard to that. And but we hope that you guys have gleaned some helpful information from our conversation today, and join us next time on Two Guys on a Porch.
Hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Please like and subscribe, rate, all the stuff you do on all the social media platforms. Thanks, guys.
Let us know what your drink and cigar of choice is at twoguysonaporch.com, and you'll be entered into a drawing to get some Two Guys on a Porch swag